Hello everyone. Today I will discuss the article Shakespeare in the Bush by Lahara Bahanan. In this article, Bahanan travels to West Africa and shares the story of Shakespeare's Hamlet with the Tiv people. She expects that the story will have the same meaning everywhere. However, as she explains the story, she realized that the Tiv people understand it very differently. They reinterpret the characters, family relationships, and events based on their own culture, beliefs, and traditions. This leads to misunderstanding between Bohanan and the Tea people, but also important learning about cultural differences. The main idea of the article is that worldview shapes how people understand meaning. A worldview is the way a person sees and interprets the world based on culture, values, religion, and life experience. Even though both Bahanan and the Tip people hear the same story, they interpret it differently because they have different worldviews. This shows that the meaning is not universal, it depends on culture. The article strongly demonstrates how worldview affects cultural interpretation. For example, the Tea people question why Hamlet behaves the way he does, especially in relation to family and revenge. Their understanding is based on their own cultural expectations about family responsibility, justice, and social order. Bahanan's interpretation comes from a Western literary and cultural perspective, while the Tea people interpret the story through their lived social norms. This shows that people do not just receive information, they interpret it through their cultural lenses. One ethnocentric bias is the article is Bohannan's initial belief that Hamlet has only one correct interpretation. She assumed that her understanding is universal and that the Tea people will naturally agree with her explanation. This reflects ethnocentrism because she views her own culture as the standard for interpreting meanings. As the discussion continues, she realized that the tip interpretations are not wrong, they are simply different because they come from a different worldview. This helps her recognize her assumptions were shaped by her own cultural background. The story challenges the idea that our own cultural values are normal or the right way of thinking. Bohanan learns that what seems obvious or logical in one culture may not make sense in another. The Tip people's interpretations are consistent with their own cultural system, just like Bohanan's interpretation makes sense within hers. This challenges the idea of cultural superiority and shows that all cultures have valid way of understanding the world. A unique norm in my culture in Nepal is touching the feet of elder to show respect and receive blessing. As a Hindu, I grew up practicing this tradition during festivals, family gathering, and important life events. In my culture, this is as seen as deeply respectful and meaningful act. However, an outsider might interpret it differently. Someone from another culture background may see it as unusual or unnecessary because it does not match their own way of showing respect. This shows how the same behavior can have different meanings depending on worldview. A best practice for cross cultural communication is to approach differences with curiosity instead of judgment. Instead of assuming our interpretation is correct, we should ask questions and try to understand the cultural meaning behind people's behavior. In the article, Bahanan improves her understanding when she listens to the Tip people's explanation instead of rejecting their interpretations. This shows that effective communication requires openness, respect, and willingness to learn from other perspectives. A personal experience that relates to this happened when I moved from Nepal to the America. In Nepal, it is normal and respectful to ask personal questions about family or relationships when meeting someone. It is a way of showing interest and friendliness. However, in the United States, I learned that people often consider this question private. At first, I was surprised, but I understand that this difference comes from cultural norms. Like Bohanan's experience, I realized that the same behavior can be interpreted in different ways, depending on worldview. In conclusion, the most important lesson I learned from this article is that worldview shapes how people see and interpret everything around them. Culture influences what people consider normal, logical, or respectful. Because of this, misunderstandings are common in intercultural communication. However, when we stay open minded and respectful, we can learn from different perspectives and communicate more effectively across cultures. My reference for this article is Laura Bohanan's article Shakespeare in the Bush, published in Natural History in 1966. Thank you.